side and allow it to relax. Bring your awareness to your left leg. Stretch your left leg long from hip to toes. Squeeze the left leg and become aware of all of the muscles from the toes up to the hip. Inhale and raise the left leg a few inches. Exhale, relax the leg. Rock it gently from side to side and allow everything to relax. Bringing your awareness to your right arm. Stretch your right arm long. Splay the hand and make it into a fist. Squeeze the right arm and hand and become aware of all of the muscles from the fingers to the shoulder. Inhale and raise the arm a few inches. Exhale, relax the arm. Rock it gently from side to side and allow it to relax. Bring your awareness to your left arm. Stretch your left arm long. Splay the fingers and make the hand into a fist. Squeeze the left arm and hand and become aware of all of the muscles from the fingers to the shoulder. Inhale and raise the arm a few inches. Exhale, relax the arm. Rock it gently from side to side and allow it to relax. Bring your awareness to your buttock. On an inhale, contract the buttock. Feel both sides equally. As you exhale, relax the buttock. Feel the earth supporting you. Bring your awareness to your abdomen, your pelvis. On an inhale, fill up the abdomen and pelvis. Expand the front of the body. And on your exhale, relax. Relax the abdomen. Feel the pelvis softening towards the earth. Bringing your awareness to your chest, your lungs, your heart. On an inhale, expand the chest, the lungs, and the heart. And as you exhale, relax the chest, the heart, and the lungs. Bring your awareness to your shoulders. On an inhale, draw your shoulders up towards your ears. Tense your shoulders. And exhale, relax the shoulders. Let the shoulders fall down the back and away from the ears. Bring your awareness to your neck. Gently rock the head from the right to the left and back to center. Bring your awareness to your jaw. On an inhale, clench your jaw tightly. And as you exhale, relax the jaw. Allow the jaw to soften. Bring your awareness to your nose, your mouth, and your eyes. On an inhale, draw them all together. Squeeze the face tightly. And as you exhale, relax the face. Feel the brow smooth and soft. Observe the body as it is freed from the tension of the muscles. Observe the breath moving in and out through the nose. Inhale, fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, guide the breath down to the toes. Relax the toes, the tops of the feet, and the bottoms of the feet. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the ankles. Allow the ankles to relax. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the shins and calves. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the kneecaps and the backs of the knees. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the thighs and hips. Allow the breath to return to normal. Observe the legs heavy with relaxation. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the fingertips, the palms, and the backs of the hands. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the wrist. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the forearms. Inhale, fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the elbows. Inhale, fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to relax the upper arms and shoulders. Allow the breath to return to normal and relax. Observe the arms and legs heavy with relaxation. When the arms and legs are heavy, the entire body can be still and relax. Inhale, fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the buttock. Allow the buttock to soften. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the inside of the pelvis, the pelvic organs. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the abdomen and each abdominal organ. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the inside of the rib cage, the lungs, and the heart. Allow the breath to return to normal and relax. Feel the front of the body softening with relaxation. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to the tailbone and low back, each vertebra, muscle, and nerve. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the mid-back and spine, each vertebra, muscle, and nerve. Inhaling, filling the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to brush the upper back and spine, between the shoulder blades and behind the heart. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath from the heart through the throat. Inhale and fill the lungs completely. And as you exhale, send the breath to bathe the brain in relaxation. Allow the breath to return to normal. Observe the body heavy with relaxation. The arms and legs are heavy like anchors. Observe the gentle breath moving in and out through the nose. Observe the gentle breath. Allow the gentle breath to be guided down, to brush away any thoughts, feelings, memories, or sensation in the feet, the ankles, calves, and shins. Guide the gentle breath to brush the kneecaps and the backs of the knees, the thighs and hips, letting go of any thoughts, feelings, memories, or sensations that reside in the legs. Gently guide the gentle breath to brush the fingertips, the palms, the backs of the hands. Allow the gentle breaths to move into the wrist and the forearms. Let go of anything you're carrying that no longer serves. Guide the gentle breath to brush the elbows, the upper arms, shoulders, and shoulder blades. Let go of any burdens you're shouldering. Gently guide the gentle breath to brush the glutes, the inside of the pelvis, and each pelvic organ, releasing any thoughts, feelings, memories, or scars. Guide the gentle breath into the abdomen. Allow it to brush the inside of the abdomen, each abdominal organ. Allow any sensations or feelings to be transformed into sensations of contentment, of empowerment. Guide the gentle breath up into the chest. Brush the lungs, the heart, releasing any deep-seated heartache behind the heart. Guide the gentle breath up into the throat, releasing any unspoken words. Allow the gentle breath to brush the inside of the head, releasing any thoughts, feelings, memories, or limiting beliefs. Bathe the brain in deep relaxation, peace, contentment, and joy. Observe the body, the arms, the legs, heavy. With every exhalation, you feel heavier, like you're sinking into the floor. Observe the mind, calm and cool, tranquil and serene. Now go deeper within, seeking out that place inside where contentment, joy, peace, and bliss nestle up and rest next to your own divine being. Slowly draw your awareness back to the gentle breath. Vital, life-giving breath flowing in and out through the nose. Inhale deeply. As you exhale, send the vital breath to awaken the toes, the bottoms of the feet, and the tops of the feet. Inhale deeply, and as you exhale, send the vital breath to awaken the ankles, the shins, and the calves. Inhale, filling the lungs deeply, and as you exhale, send the vital breath to the thighs, the hips. Inhaling vital, life-giving breath. Sending this vitality to the fingertips, the palms, the backs of the hands. Inhale deeply and send this vital breath to the wrist, forearms, elbows. Inhale, filling the lungs with vitality. And as you exhale, send the breath to the upper arms, the shoulders. Continue to breathe deeply, bringing new, fresh, vital energy into the body. With every inhalation, feel the body awaken and enlivened with vital, life-giving prana. Slowly moving fingers and toes. You might even stretch long. As you're ready, gently opening the eyes. View the first rays of light through the windows of the soul. Observe the feeling of peace, tranquility, and well-being that is living and breathing you. And take all the time that you need, guys, to come back. And we're going to set a timer so that we can take some time. I've got to find my timer. So that we can take some time to discuss this experience of deep relaxation before we go into our lesson today. So if anybody has any feedback they would like to share, feel free. How was it? Melissa?
Oh, that was so good. It was so delicious.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I found myself though, like, and I don't remember what the words were that you used it, but when it was kind of like nestle up and cuddle next to your divine, like
Yeah.
I started to get to the point where I was like, I have had a lot of body image issues and self-love issues following cancer treatments.
Right.
And that was so powerful. Like it was just genuinely feeling a deep love for myself again, and recognizing that like everything that I've been through is, it was okay. And just feeling that, I don't even know how to explain it, but it was just, I wish I had had that when I was going through, just so I could be a little bit more compassionate to myself and just love on myself, the way that I needed to in that moment. So thank you. That was just really, it was really powerful. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. No tears in my eyes as well. I completely 100% agree with you. When we start to talk about how Neshala uses it and how she's used it in the past, specifically with cancer, yeah, it's pretty moving. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Thanks for sharing, Melissa. Anybody else? Thoughts, feelings?
Hi, my name's Abigail. It's my first time on the live sessions.
Hi, Abigail.
I thought that was so lovely. It's been a while since I've done Yoga Nidra, and yeah, I think going to that space of like self-compassion, I can forget about it when I'm just rushing around and working, and so it was amazing to like go back there, and I feel like I almost fell asleep, but it's like I love that place of like deep relaxation where I'm still awake, but it's like almost sleep. So I really enjoyed it, and I've needed to completely relax like that, and so it was good to be like called there and guided there.
Cool. Awesome, Abigail. Thanks. Welcome. Nice to see you. Tara, good morning.
Hi. Um, I just wanted to say how restorative that was for me, particularly because, in part, because of the contrast with yesterday. And I had quite a lot of fallout from yesterday's session. Like about 2 hours afterwards, just all the stuff
Yeah.
started coming out, and it was one of those up until midnight crying my face off sort of days.
Tara, you called me.
And I spent most of this morning, it's like 4 in the afternoon here. I spent most of this morning feeling exhausted. And that was so gentle by comparison. And I mean, it was a lovely deep place, and I'd never done it before. I mean, that kind of yoga nidra, but it was, yeah, it was what I needed, I think. So thank you. I mean, thanks for both in a way, because the extremity was powerful too, even if it was hard.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Thanks, Tara, for sharing. So we've got a few people who did not have a great experience. So I'd love to hear. Margot?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I have never had this experience before, and I've been practicing Yoga Nidra for quite a while, and just something happened. You were so gentle and soothing, and I was having a marvelous experience, and then some bizarre memory,
Yeah.
and I just had to open my eyes. It's like my entire childhood flashed before my eyes, and I thought, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so I opened my eyes, I took some breaths, I continued to listen to you,
Yeah.
and that calmed me down. And I thought, uh-oh, I think I have work to do. Quick dial to the therapist, you know?
Well, it's so, I think that what comes up for me around this, and we have somebody else who had a similar experience, I'd love to hear from you as well. It's like you get to a place where you are so relaxed that you can access these like very recessed memories, and then they come up and sometimes can be very scary. So it's rare that it happens with this one, but I actually can see why it would happen with this one, because it is so gentle and so like contained that you might feel like, oh yeah, I can go there. And then, your unconscious is like, whoa.
But I have to say that I knew I was in a safe place with a safe guide, and also in the bigger picture with safe people that were all having this experience. So I knew it was okay. And actually, it's revelatory. Now I know I have something left to work on. That's pretty good news. Means I'm alive.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. So who else had an experience like that?
I had an interesting experience just because from yesterday, I was like really shot open, I think, and I was expecting this morning to be similar, and I was like waiting for it. And so it was hard for me to like completely let go. And I've just felt like I was in a deep state of relaxation, but I wasn't able to like fully let go because I was like, my ego was like holding on because I thought it was going to be like more intense. But I'm glad I experienced it. So now next time I do Neshalas, I can like kind of know how this one goes in contrast to yesterday's.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. Thanks, Brooke.
Mm-hmm.
Taylor, did you have anything you want to add?
Did you say Tyler?
Is it Tyler? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, like, my heart is actually still kind of like racing. Like, there was like a point where like I could feel like my eyelids moving, like I was dreaming, and then like all of a sudden I got like really scared out of like nowhere, but like I was able to like bring myself back in and be like, okay, like focus on your breath and like calm down. So like I could actually like feel my heart racing a little bit, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I know that I'm okay. So it's definitely like interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Okay, we've got a few hands raised, so we'll go in there. Let me see where they are. All right. Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. Well, I have not, I guess, technically slept since yesterday, but I think that with what's going on cosmically, there was like a portal opening because I usually need a lot of deep rest, especially when my body's hurting. And for, I guess, 3 days now, I don't think I've actually gone to bed at all. And I was pretty, not wired, but intensely focused. And I accomplished like so much in a compressed time throughout the night for goals that I've been trying to work on. They just kind of opened up. Everything was lining up, boom, 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 boom. It was kind of crazy. Like, you're like taking everything and putting it together. And with this session this morning, I thought, okay, well, I'm a little tired, but this just completely recharged me and energized me. Now I feel like I could go another day, which I don't want to because I want the deep actual rest. But today I was allowed, now that I understand what's going on, I was able to like put pieces together of what I'm seeing to start opening more of a euphony, which every day my intention for like a year has been the same, to develop my highest self. So today it was like actually different because of yesterday's learning. So this is definitely coming together like in leaps and bounds. So I'm really excited about where it's going. And I don't feel like I need to take it easy, but I do need to research yantra from yesterday as well. So that's a whole nother thing. But you definitely have a gift. So thank you. Keep doing this for everyone.
That's not me, trust me. It's just it's you guys.
Will you help us get there?
Thank you, darling. Angelic.
Hi. So I do want to bring back a little bit from yesterday. I realized like I didn't hear a lot of the stuff that you were saying when you were mentioning everything. I was like, oh, I didn't. I heard only some of those colors of the lotus, which was interesting. But later on, I was having like physical purge, and I was like, oh, she worked me out. And I was just like, okay, so drinking a lot of water. Like I had to drink so much water to keep my body hydrated from the purging. And then like slight emotions did come up, but I was really grateful for it because what was coming up was actually internally and externally healing a situation that I needed to let unfold on its own. So that was very much appreciated. I'm sorry if you hear my dog snoring. And then as for right now, I swore I thought I heard everything as well because you were putting our body, our muscles, it was completely relaxing. But I guess I didn't hear when you said for us to niche ourselves to our divine being. I did not hear that. But I was in a complete just feeling the pulsation of like my cells and the energy in my body just moving, doing its job, and just really it was exactly what I needed. And I thought I was like gonna go to sleep because I also have not slept. I must have slept maybe like an hour. So, but I didn't go to sleep and it was just perfect. So thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Thank you so much. All righty, Faith.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. That was my first experience, and I agree with, I don't know what's going on the past 2 days, but I've had this super intense headache, and I've been trying to study, and I'm like, just let it go. It's not going to happen. So this, for me, it was almost like an out-of-body experience in that I could hear you, but it's almost like I could hear you from somewhere else, and my body was just heavy, like super duper heavy, but in a good way, not in a bad heavy, just like, I don't know, it was really weird. It was almost, that's all I could say. It's like an out of body experience. So maybe it's going to help me integrate whatever was downloading from those headaches. But I really did enjoy that. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome. Thank you for sharing. Jenny.
Yeah, I still had kind of like those muscle spasms that you said were basically going from alpha to theta too quickly. Is that what it is?
So it's going from beta to theta too quickly.
Okay. I still had that, but I had it in a different area this time. And I don't know, is that common with this style of yoga nidra?
Well, so I'll tell you what, so Richard Miller is the person who told me that the muscle spasms are from going too fast from beta to theta. That's what Richard Miller said. Before Richard told me that, my hypothesis was that you were releasing somatic tension. Okay, and we're going to talk about this later. So maybe it's a little of both. I don't know. When I used to do yoga nidra at first, I would have a lot of those like somatic releases, but I was in alpha. I was not in theta, because when you're in theta, you're now sleeping, right? So but I'm not a psychotherapist or a doctor, so I always teach what Richard said, but I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't a somatic element too. And Peter Levine is one of the somatic therapist. He's like one of the most well-known somatic therapists. And he is probably the person that I would ask about the relation between those twitches in like deep relaxation meditation to somatic trauma in the body. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but that was my thought, to be honest. And I used to teach it that way until Richard said, oh no, it's because of this. And I said, okay, you're the doctor. I defer to the MD, right? But I think there might be some more to it.
Thank you. And this time was definitely like less jarring coming out of it than last time. Yesterday was like almost when you wake up from a nightmare that doesn't have anything scary in it, but it was a nightmare in the back of your mind anyway, and you're like, why was that?
Sure. sure. Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Okay. I've got Tanya next.
Hi. It was very interesting for me. This one I think was easier for me to follow the kind of scan of the body. I thought actually what was most interesting for me was how clearly I was able to direct my exhalation and feel energy to the parts of the body that you said. And I know when we're actually doing our asanas that we use exhalation to go deeper in a stretch, but I had never really used it in a way to direct energy to a part of the body and feel kind of that, I don't know, the prana, the chi, whatever. But I just found that really, really interesting, that particularly with the gentle breath, I felt it with the deep breathing cycle as well. But by the time we did the second one with the gentle breath cycle in the scan, how every single part of the body and just directing the exhalation to that felt incredibly energized, in a very positive way. So that was I think the first time that I had experienced that.
Cool. Awesome. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing, Tanya. Barnaby. Barnaby, are we here? So yes, Estrella, is it Estrella? Okay, I will message you and maybe you can come on. Alrighty, so any other thoughts before we move on? Okay. All right. So Fia asked if you could use this at the end of Shavasana, like integrate it with Shavasana, and I don't see why not. I think you certainly could. I steer away. This is just a personal thing. So this is not, this is my opinion, okay? So it's definitely polarized with my perception of reality, right? I don't talk during Shavasana. I will sometimes play music, but my own Shavasana, if it's my practice at my house, I won't have anything going, like, because I just want to drop out of the thinking mind so far that I don't have to be in that vritti. But I think you definitely could. You could, you know, obviously use this or another mindfulness exercise in Shavasana as well. All right.
Thanks, Michelle. I was, sorry to jump in. I actually had a similar question. Would you be able to, for example, switch from restorative into this?
Yes, 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 yes. And in fact, I think that's the best lead in. Yin, you know, I mean, in fact, I think Grace and I talked about this years ago when I was first starting yoga therapy, and we talked about like Yin and Yoga Nidra. And now that I've had so much experience with it, I do not recommend Yin and Yoga Nidra. I think Yin and restorative is a much better option. It's much more supportive. I'm sorry, what I meant to say was I think restorative and Yoga Nidra is a much better option. Yin and Yoga Nidra might be activating for a large population. All right, oh, there we go. There's our timer. So right on schedule, guys. So we're gonna move in and let's talk about what we just did and what it looks like from a more scientific standpoint. All righty. All right. Okay, guys. So holding trauma. So I'm going to start with this whole idea of holding trauma. And some of you have been in some of my trainings before where I talk about bunnies and the way that bunnies release trauma. But like when you are a wild animal, like you will basically, you are either a prey or predator. And a lot of predators are also prey for other animals, right? So you are always on the lookout for something. And the animal's nervous system is so cool because it knows what it needs to do. There's not a lot of, you know, my husband will be walking by the deer in the neighborhood and I'm like, what do you think those deer are thinking? And he's like, they don't think anything. They just are deer. And I'm like, well, you don't know. You don't know what's inside a deer's consciousness. But they're made so they don't have to process. They don't have to think through that. Their bodies are made to dispel any trauma like immediately. So let's say this cute little bunny gets picked up by a hawk, and then the hawk's like, man, this bunny's a lot heavier than I thought it was, and it drops the bunny in the field. And the bunny will run and then jump into the air and fling its body around to release all of the energy and then go hide. And that's its way of releasing the trauma. So, you know, gazelles do the same thing. If a cheetah goes up and it like is going to attack the gazelle, and Peter Levine talks a lot about this. So this is sort of where I got it from. The cheetah goes up, attacks the gazelle. Now the cheetah has the gazelle in its mouth, but the gazelle's not dead. And then there's other lions and tigers that are like, hey, I want a piece of that gazelle. So the tiger has to leave the gazelle laying there and go rah, rah, rah to the other tigers. And in that 30 seconds, the gazelle hops up, shakes, and runs away. And that is the animal's ability to reset their central nervous system. So not even their central nervous system, their peripheral nervous system, right? So the peripheral nervous system has our sympathetic, parasympathetic. And so when the sympathetic gets activated in an animal, it will release that tension and then move on about its day. It doesn't sit there and like work through it. It just releases it and it moves on. And, you know, depending on the type of animal, and again, I'm not a veterinarian, but I have looked into like, well, some animals have a frontal lobe, some animals don't. Like dolphins have a frontal lobe, for example, elephants have a frontal lobe, but some animals do not. And so when we're looking at the way the brains are created or like made up, right? Pack animals tend to be more traumatized. They can have more trauma. So dogs, coyotes, wolves, cats are not as bad as dogs. Dogs and wolves, the canine family, they really suffer a lot from trauma. And I'm sure big cats do too as well. But it's almost like their coping mechanisms are different because they've maybe been domesticated. I'm not entirely sure, but I find it really, really interesting that we fall more into that pack animal sort of mentality where we have to be in community. We want to feel accepted, seen, heard, connected to, and, you know, and subsequently we also process trauma in a different way than a lot of other mammals do. Okay, when traumatic events take place, we hold the trauma in the somatic tissue. Each cell in the body has a reaction to the experience based on a story that the chakras are relaying to the brain. So this cellular tension coupled with the postural patterns create body armor that leads to chronic pain, anxiety, depression, and a sense of separation. So I came up with this morning, and basically what I'm trying to say is something happens to me, it's a trauma. Loss, grief, abuse, it doesn't matter what it is, my body is going to take that trauma and the cells in my body are going to interpret what's going on based on the signals the chakras are sending them. So if the chakras are plexuses in the body, the plexus are along the spinal column and they actually communicate and send messages back to the spinal column all the way up to the brain, and then the brain, the unconscious brain, will deal with that, right? So like, let's say I get a lot of people telling me they've been bullied in school and it's like affected their whole life, you know, like a lot more people than I thought. And what's happened is they've experienced these traumas their whole life. They were teased, they were called names, all these things. They held it in their body. Then, so their cells in their body react a certain way. They start telling themselves stories based on the messages the chakras are sending. So what is bullying? Like bullying, I'm not safe. I'm not valid here. I don't belong here. And I'm disempowered, right? I'm unloved and I can't speak. Like these are the things that the lower chakras up to the throat chakra are telling that individual unconsciously. And so then the individual begins to hold, and these postural patterns become this body armor that is created by communication between the chakras and the brain on an unconscious level. Deep relaxation is not polarizing. It provides clients with an opportunity to deeply relax in their somatic body, and this resets the body and gives it a chance to release those patterns. So basically, what I found when I was doing this is, like I said, I'm always pretty transparent with it. I've had a lot of trauma. I think everybody has had a lot of trauma to a certain extent. Everybody's perception of trauma is different, and you can't compare your trauma to somebody else's, right? Everybody's trauma is valid, and it can't be compared. It's not like one person had worse trauma than you. What you experience is what you experience, and that's what you're here to work on, right? But I guess I realized that I had trauma, but I didn't realize how my body was holding, and how that body holding was actually causing all of these other things. It was actually reinforcing these limiting beliefs and these stories, these scripts, right, that were going on. And so when I started to do this particular Yoga Nidra, what it did for me, what I experienced in it, and it wasn't always a good experience. I actually had an experience that was very activating one time with this particular Yoga Nidra, and then subsequently it worked itself out. It was fine. But what happened for me in my felt experience is my body started to let go. I was one of those people who couldn't relax. Can anybody relate to that? Like, you just cannot relax. There's no way. Like, you lay down and you're like, I can't do it. So, self-medicating or doing something to tire myself out. Like, I would always be away from the house when I was a teenager, because if I was at the house, then I had to deal with all this tension, right? So, those are these patterns and these samsaras that cause us to continue these postural patterns, to continue this stuff. When you are able to let go, all of your muscles, you're like, wait a second, I remember this. This is what it feels like to be relaxed. And the more you do it, the more you undo the doing of those postural patterns. With a lot of the suggestion within this particular Yoga Nidra, and I actually did that from memory. If I read the book, it would have been better. I just can't find the book. But it's focused on let go of your burdens, right? Did you guys hear me say that? Let go of whatever you're shouldering, let go of any, thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations, scars. I actually omit that sometimes when I'm working with especially when I'm working with elderly people, because there's so much unspoken sexual abuse in that generation, the generation of that are now 80, 90 years old. It's just a lot, and it's never been talked about. So I don't say scars. I specifically omit it. And so, but there's a lot of suggestive stuff when we get into that Vijnana Maya Kosha, and it allows the chakras to be like, oh, wait a second. Oh, okay, maybe it's not so scary out there. So steps towards deep relaxation. So you can buy this book, The Healing Path. I've had multiple copies. I keep loaning it out. I keep losing it. So this is the book. It actually has the script in it that I just did for you guys. It's in there. It also has the practice. Now, I don't do the practice like Nashala does. The practice in the book is different from what I do. Because I work with different clients, but everything that she teaches in Yoga of the Heart is in this book, and you can buy it off Amazon. Highly, highly recommend it. I think it comes with a DVD or a CD as well of her leading it, and I just can't recommend it enough. So when we practice deep relaxation, we move through the Panchamaya Kosha system in the same way as Tantric Yoga Nidra. Nashala Joy Devi's rendition of Yoga Nidra is soft and feminine and allows the body to release samskaras while it heals itself. I could not recommend it more. This Yoga of the Heart is one of the most amazing courses. It's about $1,400. It's 10 days in San Diego, California, at a monastery. It's amazing. She also does it in the Bahamas and in Australia, I want to say. So you can take it many different places. It's part of our yoga therapy training. It's an elective. We don't require it because it is an additional expense. But, you know, I mentioned, you know, we might start looking into like starting a foundation where we have like scholarships and grants and stuff like that for this type of learning. And if we do that, you know, I mean, like, it's just an amazing opportunity. Just keep it in the back of your mind. To learn more about it, you can visit her website, abundantwellbeing.com, yoga therapy, yoga of the heart. It's just an amazing experience. So we always go back to the sutras. Remember, that's Nushala's philosophy, right? Always back to the sutras. And this is Svadhyaya. So I say this a lot because I think that in our culture, we think self-study is something that it's not. We think self-study is, you know, why are you doing what you're doing? Nope. Self-study is why are you doing what you're doing in relation to the Yoga Sutras? Like, and can you look at your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your sensations, and see and identify, you know, what type of chitta vritti you're working with, what kleshas or keep preventing you from seeing the truth, you know, what is the truth, even the sutras tell you. And so they actually leave nothing to the imagination. And that is real svadhyaya. So Nushala's deep relaxation, we first practice asana, then pranayama, and then yoga nidra. I've created my own mini sequence that I used at the hospital. Her sequence is much more robust and adapted for individuals who cannot easily move from the floor to the chair. So you can see her series, my series, they're similar because there's joint freeing exercises. If you ever get a chance to work with a man named Antonio Souza, let's see if I have it up here, Antonio Souza, yeah, here it is. If you are dealing with grief, this is your jam, this right here. Antonio Souza, he basically has taken the joint freeing series, which some of you guys may know from Menduka Styles, the joint freeing series. And he has created a protocol for grief, for working with grief. And Antonio Souza says that each of the joints holds trauma. And so he talks about like each of the joints holding trauma and how they hold trauma, which I find really fascinating. Yeah. Just an FYI, if you ever work with him, he's very strict. He will not let you leave the room unless you tell him why you're leaving, because he doesn't want anybody leaving because they're triggered. He's also a psychotherapist. He's an interesting guy. I love him. He's very Italian, very like machismo. So like, just to like be aware that he can come off a little brash, but he's really an amazing, amazing guy. Highly recommend him too. So pranayama, chandra, nadi shodhana. So basically, Nushala's philosophy is to use the asana and then use the pranayama. And so here, it's actually 4. I copied this from Toomey just to give you a picture. But remember, it's in through it. So exhale left, inhale left, and then exhale right, inhale right, and then exhale left, right? So it's really 5, there's 5 steps in Chandra Nadi Shodhana. So deep relaxation, and I love this kitten on a beach because, man, I want to come back that kitten. I'm going to be that kitten on the beach, just relaxing like that. We begin to come in, okay, so we begin by coming onto the back or sitting in a chair. We begin with progressive muscle relaxation, which gets us into the body, the Anamaya Kosha. Then we bring awareness to the breath, that's Pranamaya Kosha. And then we bring awareness to increasing the heaviness in the body, so that's Manomaya Kosha. And then from there, we visualize the subtle bodies. And so she does that, she's real sneaky with that. And I sort of alluded to it. I didn't do it as well as the book does. I will be really honest with you. It just doesn't come naturally for me. And for a lot of my clients that are like over the age of like 55, 60, I omit it because it almost seems a little woo-woo. Does that make sense? So like, you got to know your audience. And so sometimes I will omit the let go of what you're burdening or what you're holding, let go of what you're shouldering, like release any, any scars, feel empowered, let go of any deep-seated heartache. I tend to omit that just because I know what that population thinks about some of those things. Like my grandmother, for example, in her 90s, was not into mental health, thought mental health was a sign of weakness, those types of things. So acknowledging in that population, I would say not even 55, it's more like 65, 70 to like 90 it's hard for them to like work with those emotional things. So I omit them altogether, and it works as well. And I don't have to worry about them like being freaked out. That's the Vijnana Maya Kosha. Finally, we allow students to rest in pure awareness. That's Ananda Maya. Ananda Maya is where people find the Upanishads, the Vedas, all the truths of the universe, and ultimately the undercurrent of Anatakarna through the lens of Chitta, pure awareness. So remember, Chitta Vritti is the fluctuation. Chitta is universal, is our experience of universal consciousness. When we take, if it's chit, just C-H-I-T, chit is universal consciousness. When I add the T-A, it becomes individual consciousness. When I add the vritti, it becomes all the BS that we bought into. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so wait, before I go back to iRest, so it's super, super simple. Nashala doesn't like beat around the bush. She doesn't make it too complicated. She works like, it's almost like she works like almost incognito with the consciousness, right? So it's like you don't really have to go into that story, which is why I really like it. And it's very easy to translate. I do also want to just note that, the tantric yoga nidra we did yesterday can be extremely activating. And this particular yoga nidra is designed for people who are in their older years, because it's designed for people with cardiac issues. Cardiac issues typically come, like in your later years. There are obviously exceptions to the rule, right? But so even the asana practices are adopted for people who have more sedentary lifestyles, maybe who are have a difficult time with mobility. She doesn't do a lot of standing asanas, chairs are involved, so it really is for a different population than we're used to working with. A lot of people that are, in the yoga community are seeking out these holistic healing techniques, are fit, they do yoga, they meditate, they do these things, right? And so this it's almost like a bridge. It's applicable to people who are already in the mindfulness community, but it's also applicable to people who are not and might even be a little afraid of it, right? So any questions about Nashalas, any thoughts before we move on to Richard's?
Michelle?
Yes.
So I have already gone through all of the modules for the 300 hour, but I didn't necessarily see this script.
I don't give it, I give my interpretation of it. I don't give it
Okay.
for training. Yeah.
Okay, got it. I was just curious. Thank you.
But if you buy the book, which she's also, like Neshla is so cute. She's like a little sprite. I just love her. She, if you buy the book, you can use it, it's as effective as taking the training. I had the book before I did the training, and after I did the training, I was like, well, I really am glad I did the training because I loved the experience. But truth be told, the book is just as good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I got it yesterday. So
yeah. So let me tell you so I'm going to tell you a story, and this may be activating for some people, but it goes back to you can have a cure without having, or you can have a healing without having a cure. Okay. So Nashala did a lot of work, and it's funny because in Yoga of the Heart, it's supposed to be, it says on my certificate, cardiac and cancer certification. we talk about cancer for like 10 minutes. Like literally it does not get a lot of attention. And I think because people are so scared of it. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to think about it. People don't want to look at it. And she does bring up some really good points. She's the one who, Melissa and I were talking the other day, and I said, you know, people don't want to hug people who have cancer. And Nashala is the one who brought that up. And my mom had cancer, and I can attest to that. My grandmother had cancer, and I can attest to that. It's not everybody that doesn't want to hug people with cancer, but I think there's a misperception that cancer is so scary that you don't want to touch it, you know, like figuratively and literally, right? And so, you know, Nashala acknowledges that. She also acknowledges how weak chemotherapy makes people. She acknowledges how, you know, the pharmaceutical companies are not looking for cures because of the money part about it, right? Which is heartbreaking in and of itself. But she does tell a lot of stories, and just to prepare you guys, you know, if you do train or study with Nashala, she will tell you the same stories every time she trains with you, and you'll probably have heard some of them from me. So, you know, they're wonderful stories, but just be aware of that. So Nashala was telling the story, and this was the most memorable part of the cancer portion for me. And she was telling a story about a yoga teacher in California that had been friends with Nashala, and they had worked together, not through Ornish, but through, you know, some of the other programs. And she was on like she had had cancer and it had come back, and she was getting to the place where they had called in hospice and stuff like that. And so Nashala is very accessible. So this teacher who had studied with, you know, with Nashala called Nashala on the phone. I've done that too, by the way. She answers. It's very interesting. And, hey, how you doing, Nashala? So I called her on the phone and say, hey, Nashala, I need your help. I can't transition. I can't pass. I'm ready to go, but for whatever reason, I don't know how to do it. How do I do it? And Nashala's like, well, you know, just go back through the Panchamaya. Like, just go, you know, go back through. And she's like, I can't do it without you. Will you do it? And Nashala did deep relaxation for her and took her all the way through. And at the end of deep relaxation, the husband got on the phone and said, you know, she's asleep. Thank you so much. And she died within hours. And so, you know, the power of it that really resonated with me was that we forget, you know, Richard says we're always remembering and forgetting. We forget how to go home. We forget how to leave. We become so attached to the physical body that we literally forget. And this system takes you to your divine self, to nestle up next to your divine self. And when the body is ready to release, that is where you go. And it's just a really beautiful, beautiful way. And I've actually, you know, I've talked to Molly's on the call too, I think today. Hi, Molly, if you're on. Molly works with hospice. She's a dance therapist, and I believe a dance therapist, and now going through all of our trainings, and she's a mentor as well. And Molly and I have talked about writing a yoga teacher training, or her writing and me sort of supporting her writing a yoga teacher training for hospice workers. And this would be one of the biggest parts of it, is teaching them to use deep relaxation to transition people, because it just takes the fear away. It just takes it all away. You don't need, you know, you don't need to be afraid. There's nothing to fear. So, I mean, even as I say all this stuff, guys, I'm going to be transparent. I'm like getting somatic reactions all over my body. And I'm like, you know, like feeling, you know, cold and hot. You guys can feel that, right? In your legs and your arms, like when you start talking about stuff like this. So, you know, it is being embodied in this human experience is really, really, really a sensational experiential process. And, you know, we get very much in our heads about things, but if we can let go and let the body go, things are just so much more peaceful. So, so yeah, any thoughts or questions? Comments?
I have one, Michelle.
Yes, Viana.
What is your take? I have the old one. I've had Nashala's book for years. Is it worth updating to the new edition?
Does yours have the script in it?
I've got one, I think. I haven't read it in a long, long time.
I think yours is fine. I think yours is.
It's the white one, the white background.
I don't have that one, but I think if it has the script in there, she only has one script, guys. So it's not like.
I think there's only one.
Yeah, there's only one. And I use it. I actually, even today when I did it, I normally teach that one. So I teach it from memory. But if you notice, I added a couple things of eye rest in there. I say stuff like, adjust the body so that you're 10% more comfortable. That's very eye rest. Or I say any thoughts, feelings, memories, sensations. That's very eye rest too. So I add a little bit of eye rest in when I do Nushala stuff. But yeah, I don't think you need to upgrade.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Deanna. Any other thoughts, comments?
Hey, Michelle, if no one else is ready to say something now, I can say something if you're ready. Good. So I guess, like I always tell people, you're never done emptying. It's not like I'm going to get there and release it and then I'm going to have this great life. It's a daily practice, literally, this emptying concept. So a lot of things from your story, like I'll just be really straight up. I never knew who you were. I was drawn for some reason, like my heart I knew I was going to do the 500 hour and I was just researching. And for some reason, I just kept being drawn to My Vinyasa, and everywhere I looked, it's My Vinyasa. And then I'm starting the course. And as soon as I started to get to the section early on in your personal story, I was like, okay, is there a mirror going on? Like, what's happening? Am I going to be like this yoga stalker? This is bizarre. But just this linear alignment with the constant finding myself constantly in the position of the caregiver and being very empathic, not knowing how to protect my energy, or not protect it, but just keep it balanced. So ultimately, I was always finding myself giving, drained. And then ultimately, after caregiving for my brother, moving across the country when he was 18, he became sick, died at 22. It was literally everything you described in the well yesterday. He was involved in a very experimental treatment. So I don't want to trigger anyone, but bottom line, just these series of clients as well as family members where I'm in this drained position. So I'm definitely going to look up that book. There's so much that is coming up, and I believe that everything that happened with my brother and then all of the other individuals that I was caregiving for, and my own illnesses and restoring my own health again with determination, is really in vein of offering this accessible to the masses, everyone. What we're seeing now, everyone's experiencing trauma. And I also work with the elderly population professionally, and again, privately. I'm currently my grandmother's primary caregiver. She's 91 and starting to decline mentally, where we didn't think we'd see that. And it's happening really fast and it's aggressive. And so things are shifting constantly. But maintaining and holding the space while nurturing our own space and energy seems so critical. And I feel like this is the right place for us, and we're going to receive that, hopefully, or at least being pointed in the direction of how to heal ourselves and heal so many others. So this is amazing work. Thank you for what is being uncovered here.
Yeah.
On the journey.
Thank you. I really, I am a big believer that first of all, I'm a big believer that we always have work. It doesn't go away. It's always there. And sometimes we hold on to it because we're bored. I'll be honest. I have some that I just keep holding on to because I'm bored. And it's so funny because it's like a cycle. Every month when I get bored, I'm just like, oh yeah, there it is again. Like, I just don't want to let go of it. And, maybe it's like a baby blankie or a whoopee or something like that. It keeps me human. It keeps me doing the work and asking myself, why is your ego reacting like that? Why? but when we get to a place where we are doing the work and we're doing the work consistently and we're doing the work to the place where, you know, maybe we aren't totally like free of the work, but we can come clean and hold a container in a way that is clean, then that's when we are able to start helping people to heal themselves. And I don't, you know, I'm very careful about this, like this whole healer thing. You know, I really believe that as teachers, we are empowering our clients and students to learn to heal themselves, and that I am not doing anything. I am just holding the space for them to uncover this is their birthright. They're already enlightened divine beings in a human experience. They just might not know it. And we're going to get into that with iRest, because iRest is like, I love iRest, don't get me wrong, but you know, it's like going, gone. Like you are, Richard doesn't mess around. He just takes you straight there. And for a lot of people, that can be a little scary. So, so yeah, thank you so much for what you're saying. And I agree, this is really powerful. This is actually what I think, I mean, this is again, my perspective. I believe that deep relaxation, Pratipakshibhavana, mantra, are the most powerful tools that we have in yoga. But the asana, you know, is just to get the waters to calm a little bit. But, you know, that really the powerful healing tools are these, you know, sort of other things that you can use off the mat, on the mat, in relationship, out of relationship, in relationship with self, etc. So yeah, definitely. All right, Beth Duvall.
Yeah, this is kind of, I guess, more of a business side question, or even just as a volunteer. If you're going to work with someone with cancer or heart problems, even though all we're doing is like deep meditation, do you require any kind of release form or anything like that for them to sign?
So typically I work in clinical settings. So I'm working in a hospital setting where they are, where they've already done all of their consents for like rehab, for example. Yoga is only approved in the United States for insurance reimbursement when it has to do with cardiac or cancer right now. So I can bill somebody's insurance for cardiac and cancer. That's all I can bill their insurance for.
Oh, wow. I didn't know it could be billed at all.
It can be just for cardiac and cancer though. It usually is billed under rehab and for cardiac, and then cancer, I'm not sure what they bill it under. But if you're working privately one-on-one, it's always good for people to give you like a release of liability, that's just a regular liability waiver. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Faith?
I really was liking what Alyssa was saying. I was told by a acupuncturist that, you know, fear can manifest in the kidneys, and I'm a kidney transplant patient here. But I'm finding that the Yoga Nidra would be great as a practice because healing is really secular. I mean, we know this in the universal pattern. It's secular. You know, I thought I learned some lessons, and now I'm coming around and I'm learning the same lessons again a different way. It's like, did you really learn it? So I think that this practice is really a great thing in a practice on a regular type of basis.
Yeah, yeah.
Super healthy for that kind of healing. Because scars run deep, right? And so you need to, it heals, but then it can come up and, you know, they're sensitive. So I find that I'm relearning and rehealing a lot of things.
Sure. Well, if you think about a scar, what a scar heals itself, but it has adhesions. You know, and so those adhesions will pull even if the scar itself is healed.
Yes. And all the skin around it pulls with it. Yeah.
So that can happen emotionally, intellectually, right? We heal the hurt, the initial hurt, yeah, but then there's all these other things it's attached to, you know? And so we keep going back to that initial hurt because we keep having to, you know, do the work with those adhesions, those emotional adhesions, intellectual adhesions. Yeah, I agree.
I'm grateful that our body informs us that we are not in alignment sometimes.
Oh, we're getting there. iRest is all about the messenger. So you're absolutely right. Everything that we feel, everything we sense, everything that we think is all a messenger. So yes, very much so. Exactly. Exactly. I actually, for anybody who's working with people who have COVID right now, or if you have clients or anybody at all, my opinion and philosophy is that we should be pumping this into, you know, the hospital rooms, that we should be like offering it to anybody who is taking a bed in a hospital right now. That I just want to see if we could get some, like, what would it look like? And of course, I don't have the money to push behind this kind of like clinical trial, but you know, if anybody's got friends in high places, you know, what would it look like if we could, you know, have Yoga Nidra read to, you know, people that are on ventilators? Like, what would that look like? How would that heal them? That might actually, one of the things we're working for in Austin, one of the reasons that I built the studio out wasn't even actually to do like asana classes. It was because we wanted to start to work with hospitals to get yoga therapists and yoga teachers in like La Leche. So just like breast lactation consultants, La Leche found out. So, you know, La Leche started coming into the hospitals, what, in the 70s, right? And they came in, but they didn't, the hospitals didn't want to pay them. So they started on a volunteer basis. And then La Leche worked with the insurance companies to get the insurance companies to pay for them. So now if you are having a baby in a hospital, the insurance companies will pay for a lactation consultant to come by your room once and, you know, check in with you. Well, we need yoga teachers and yoga therapists in every hospital, on every wing, going in every room, just teaching them these little tools, you know, just giving them a taste of it, you know, so that they can, you know, heal themselves and be less, because the body stress response will prevent you from healing. It will, it absolutely will. And they know that, they've seen that. So, and it's interesting because when I do a lot of research, when I have time. And when I started working in cardiac, I was doing all this research and all of these peer-reviewed journal articles with these names of yogic things, but they call them something else so that they will be like accepted by the medical community. But they're like Pratipakshapavana was in there, progressive muscle relaxation was in there, deep meditation was in there. It was all in there, just called something different. So the doctors know this stuff works. You know, we just need, they're just too busy. And if they don't want me to come in, or they don't want, you know, yoga teachers to come in, let me train your nurses, you know, let me train, you know, your support staff to do it. You know, that's again, another part of the problem. And this is, I guess, a whole other lecture about healthcare and business, but you know, the nurses are overworked. We don't have enough nurses, and they don't have the time to sit there for 45 minutes and read a Yoga Nidra script. You know, I mean, I could, you know, there's so many solutions to that though. We could have recordings, we could have pamphlets, you know, there's so many things, but that's ultimately what I'm trying to do long term, is get this more integrated into our healthcare system. Yeah. What about people who are suicide survivors? Is Nidra safe for them? You know what, to be honest, I would really defer to like, well, here's what I would say. I would say, if you're working with somebody who is a suicide survivor, please, please, please work in conjunction with a therapist. Please work in conjunction with a therapist. Don't take that on yourself. You know, don't, we have a tendency, especially as yoga teachers, yoga therapists, and healers, to want to help people, to want to save them, you know, to want to give them the tools that they need. But we also have a tendency to be empathic, right? Can we all understand that that's a tendency for us? Yeah, we are empathic. And so if we're empathic, we also have the tendency, or without boundaries, we can internalize other people's situations. And so if you're working with someone who's suicidal, or who has been suicidal, maybe not now, they're recovered, or they're in recovery, or they had a suicide experience, but it was unsuccessful, and so now they're a survivor of suicide. Work with somebody who's a professional licensed counselor so that you don't feel the brunt of that burden. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yes. Okay, any other questions? So there are children's yoga nidras, and somebody just asked about working with children. Actually, Richard Miller was looking for somebody to write children's yoga, to write a training on children's yoga nidra. And after I graduated from yoga therapy training, I talked to Monique, who was our director, and I said, I'll write it for him for free if he will let me. And the first person that they had hired basically said that she wanted more money, and there was money issues going on, right? Well, I don't care about the money. And so I've just been too busy to reach out to him, but that came up for me again today. So there are yoga nidras that are for children, and Richard Miller has a sort of an idea of creating a yoga nidra protocol just for children. And I think it would be extremely beneficial. So we'll see, maybe that'll manifest in the future. All righty. All righty. Okay. All right. Any other, we've got, wait, 2 more hands maybe. Robin, did you have something to say?
Yeah, going back to what you were talking about with offering in hospitals. My neighbor across the street from me, she used to be a news anchor for a local television station. So she had a little bit of exposure to the public, but when her little sister was about 18, she was in college, she was diagnosed with, I believe it was cervical cancer. And this woman also happens to be married to somebody who's pretty high up in our local hospital. And she found there was a nurse that was caring for her sister when she was in the hospital. And this nurse coincidentally happened to be certified in Reiki. And it was unknown by anyone there in the hospital. And this woman would literally sneak into her room, of course, with her consent, and practice Reiki on her. And she said it was amazingly helpful to her. And because my friend, you know, was sort of a local public figure, and she was married to someone who was high up in the hospital, she spearheaded a Reiki program. I think a lot of the nurses, if they were interested, got certified in Reiki, and they have now they have a formal Reiki treatment in their cancer unit, and it does not have to be hidden anymore.
Yeah, no, and Ascension just bought up a lot of these old like Catholic hospitals. I don't know if you guys have Ascension in your area, but they just bought up like all of Seton. Seton was originally a Catholic hospital in Texas. And so now they hold all of these old hospitals that were run by nuns, basically, and now they're run by a corporation. Well, the beauty of this is they're now bringing in acupuncture, yoga, they're bringing in massage therapy, they're bringing in all these alternative health treatments that wouldn't have been necessarily smiled upon from the perspective of like the church, right? So a lot of these things are like alternative, you know, and so yeah. All righty, beautiful, really nice. Okay, so we're ready to go back in. Let's talk a little bit about iRest Yoga Nidra. So iRest Yoga Nidra. So here we have iRest. iRest is Dr. Richard Miller's highly specialized yoga nidra. It is so highly specialized that I'm not even going to touch the surface of it today. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on it, and then we're going to do some practices with it. And I want to say one thing. I'm not trained in iRest formally. I've trained with Richard, but in order to get trained in iRest, you have to do like a lot of, I mean, it's hundreds of hours. It's not just 200. It's like I did 100 hours with him in silent meditation. And then you would have to do, I want to say 3 other trainings, and then 2 other like practicums or like practice teaching sort of experiences. It's like a 5-step training, and it requires like a full year. Like you can't do it quick. It's something that is a very like lengthy process. And it's expensive, and I write curriculum. So I decided when I started with yoga therapy, you know, Nashala, like I said, was my first teacher. And Nashala's teacher was Swami Satyananda. So here we go. Swami Satyananda's book is Yoga Nidra, right? And then Nashala wrote, well, what did Nashala do? She wrote a softer version of Swami Satyananda's Yoga Nidra, right? And so I knew that Nashala would, in fact, Nashala and I talked about, this idea that, you can't teach what your teacher teaches. And she said, you know what, Michelle, she said, that's a misunderstanding. The sutras say that you want your students to surpass you, that if your students surpass you, you've done your job. And that was my first interaction with Nashala, which is why I'm so in love with her. And I just really hold her dear in my heart. And she's also, and she, said she'd work with me, and she said she'd be a part of my training. And, that's really something special, and when I send students to her, she replies to them like quickly, like personally, not, she doesn't throw it to the back burner. Richard, on the other hand, Richard is an amazing guy. He's very neat. I enjoy him a lot. But Richard went through great lengths to really brand iRest. And I decided, since I write curriculum, it was better for me not to be an iRest certified teacher. It was better for me to just tell people, here's some of the things that I, got from working with Richard, from training with him. Now, if you guys really want to know what this is, go train with him. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's my sort of methodology when it comes to iRest. Richard's process for Yoga Nidra is beautiful. It's a tapestry of psychotherapy and yoga therapy from a tantric point of view. And there are 10 steps in the iRest Yoga Nidra process. The process goes through the Panchamaya, but Richard adds an additional kosha layer, Asmita Maya. What's Asmiti? Who can remember? What's Asmiti? Anybody? Asmiti is the ego. It's one of the kleshas. It's the klesha of individuality. So Asmiti Maya is an extra layer that Richard put on top of the Panchamaya kosha system, which we all think it's very funny in the yoga community. When you listen to Richard's friends and colleagues talk about iRest, they always give him a little jab about, creating an extra layer to the Panchamaya kosha system, but it's pretty right on. So this is my non-dual teacher. I've never seen him. He's not in the body, but he is definitely who I would consider my teacher. It's Ramana, and he is basically the idea that so when I say, for example, I am Michelle. So look at me, and if I was introducing you, I'd say, oh, my name's Michelle. Well, where am I pointing? I'm pointing to my heart. I'm not pointing to my head, right? So the I is actually an identificator. It's like an identifier, not identificator. It's an identifier that points to the self. And so I wanted to read this to you because this was a really, it was a cool little excerpt. So this is an excerpt from a letter on iRest website. So it says, it also supports iRest inquiry into Asmiti Maya Kosha and the discernment between the I, though, and pure I-ness. Ramana understands that it is thought that takes us into separation and away from self and the purity of being. For Ramana, the I thought is the root of all thoughts. His instruction is always the same. Turn the mind within and seek the source of the thought. As we do this with the I thought, it dissolves in the home ground of pure being, revealing a different sense of I, what Ramana calls the I, of the non-separative one, the self, the infinite, the heart of being. In the final verse, he writes, fictitious ego I dissolved, being beyond separation, this is the greatest realization of all. So here, it's important that I take a step back here because we always hear, and Ramana is actually one of the teachers that is quoted incorrectly for people saying, kill the ego, destroy the ego, right? And what he's talking about is not that we destroy the ego, but that we realize that there is no separation. This desk, this wall, this chair, I am not this is not the me, the I, but rather the experience of being is that which I am. Does that make sense? So the experience of being is not devoid of the walls in this room or the floor or the earth or the people or whatever. It is, in fact, the wholeness of the experience, but the thought that I am separate further perpetuates this misperception of separation, which leads us into suffering, right? So it's a real, you know, and I like Ramana too, because Ramana doesn't, he's not pretentious. You know, he's not like, oh, you can only get here if you go to a mountain and stay in a cave for 40 years. That's not what he says. He's like, look, it's there, it's within you. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to work on the higher self. The higher self is there. It is you. You are an experience God, right? And every other person is an experience God as well. And you're all interacting and you view it as separate, but that's just the lesson of wholeness. It's like we almost have to see what is the opposite of separation? Wholeness. We're going to talk a lot about opposites today, because that is, we buy into it's this way. Well, what is the opposite of it? If there's no duality to this, then what is the opposite of separate? It's wholeness. Well, when I look at separate and wholeness together, they both vanish and there's just being. Does that make sense? And that's Richard Miller's like crux here. That's one of the crux of I Rest. Ramana's description of the importance of discrimination between these two perceptions makes me appreciate even more Richard Miller's addition of the sheath of I-ness as Mita Maya to the traditional Yoga Nidra practice. I Rest is also very, you know, because Richard's a psychotherapist, I Rest doesn't mince words, guys. I mean, he uses a lot of psychotherapy in I Rest, which is why this book, the I Rest Program for Healing PTSD, a proven effective approach to using Yoga Nidra meditation and deep relaxation techniques to overcome trauma, this is actually written for therapists. This book is written for therapists. And it will take you through the practice of using Yoga Nidra in like a therapeutic application. It's an amazing book. I've read the book. I am happy with what the book gave me. You know, maybe someday I'll do I Rest Yoga Nidra training, but again, as long as I'm writing programs, I think it's better if I just not. He says there are 5 special messengers. So the first one is I feel contracted, I feel limited. The second one is I feel time bound, I feel lacking or flawed, I feel disconnected, I feel incomplete. So just for a moment, we'll pause here. Have you guys had visits from these messengers? Yes? I feel time bound, I feel limited, I feel incomplete, I don't feel whole. Like these are the roots of suffering, and they all lead us to what? Separation, right? It's all about the separation of the perception of being. So what Richard says, and this is where that psychotherapy component really does come in for Richard. He says, every thought, every feeling, every emotion or sensation is a messenger. I Rest puts a lot of focus on welcoming the messenger. Healing occurs through wholeness, and wholeness is integration. Integration is enlightenment, and enlightenment is samadhi. Dr. Richard Miller says that this practice produces enlightened individuals because enlightenment is being, and being is our true nature. So if you ask yourself, and this is, I keep referencing this meditation map. I'm actually working on recreating it because this is part of some of my training with Richard. And basically it starts with the Yoga Sutras. Okay, so it starts with the Yoga Sutras. And it basically talks about, I am not the mind, I am not the body. In order to know non-duality, I need to first know duality. And then it moves up, and the more you go, the more you sort of ascend into this, this place where you're like, so it's Sada Vidya. So Vidya is knowledge. So when you start to incorporate sort of this knowledge of the world, the Sada Vidya, I and this, I am. So have you ever felt like, you know, I'm not Michelle, but I am, right? I am, right? That is being, and you know, even Jesus talked about this whole idea. You know, we see this idea in other theories like Siddhartha or Buddhism, as also talks about this idea that I am, like I am not Buddha, but I am, right? And so it's this idea that we are not the identifying factors, but we are am. Well, what is am, guys? So I really hate, I'm not a language person, but I'm married to a linguist. So what is am from a linguistical standpoint? It's a conjugation of the verb to be. So what does I am mean? What does it mean? It means being. Does that make sense? Right? So if we are being, then, you know, are we identified by the skin, the hair, the color of our eyes, the shape of our bodies? Like, no, we are just being. And so the experience of life becomes being, the experience of being, rather than the experience of Michelle or the experience of Tanya or the experience of Taylor. Now, one of the things that I do, and I've told you guys this before, just because we practice these things or we come to this place in our cognitive awareness does not mean that we don't have material, and it does not mean that we're like a shell of a human being without having any emotions. Those emotions are always there, and I love IREST because it acknowledges those emotions. You can be non-dual, and you can practice non-duality as a way of life and still have emotions arise. And what do you do with them? If you're really in practice, you welcome them. Oh, jealousy. Hello, jealousy. It's been so long. Nice to see you. Come on in, have a cup of tea. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about yoga, or IREST Yoga Nidra, is we talk about, you know, welcoming these feelings, welcoming these sensations. So there's exercises that we're going to do just together so that we can talk a little bit about this. So I'm going to go through these 5 exercises, and if you get the book or if you have the book, these are on page 35 of the IREST Yoga Nidra book, Healing PTSD. And so 5 special messengers. As you forget your wholeness, 5 internal messengers arrive to guide you back home. So what Richard Miller says is that we are all enlightened beings having a human experience, and that we forget this. Okay, now this is one of the reasons why I consider Richard and Nashala my teachers, because it's not that they taught me this, it's that when I showed up at their doorstep, they confirmed it for me. Does that make sense? Inner knowing knows this already. I'm not teaching you this. Sit with yourself for a moment. Just sit with yourself for a moment. Are you whole? Are you complete exactly the way you are? If you can access that Vijnana Maya Kosha, the answer is yes, right? If you are not able to access Vijnana Maya Kosha, from Richard's perspective, it's because the messengers have created a dam that's preventing you from getting through, right? And that basically what you've done is you've put all the messengers in the waiting room. Does that make sense? And instead of seeing them and hearing them and connecting to them, you've said, nope, I don't want to talk to you, jealousy. I will see you later. And Richard really invites us to, no, go ahead and welcome them, bring them in. And he does this with this activity. So I'm going to say a thought, okay? And what I'd like for you to do, if you have a piece of paper, write down the opposite thought. Write the opposite thought down. So this is Pratipakshabhavana in action. I'm going to say something and you're going to write down the opposite. I feel contracted and limited. I feel limited by time. I feel that I am lacking and flawed. I feel confused and disconnected. I feel incomplete. So this is a really great litmus test. You know, again, I haven't been through to watch Richard train, but I imagine that, you know, if I was going to teach somebody how to use this in yoga therapy, for example, then I would say, okay, you know, this is a great thing to have on your questionnaire. You know, when you feel limited by time, what message comes up? When you feel limited in general, what message comes up? When you feel lacking or flawed, what message comes up? When you feel disconnected, what message? When you feel incomplete, what message? And then you can get a barometer of where your client's headspace is. Like what are they thinking? How do they view themselves in relation to the wholeness of the world? So who wants to do the first one? Messenger number 1, limited. Who wants to give me their answer? You can just unmute yourself and give it to me.
I have freedom.
Okay, freedom, that's nice. I like that. Richard says his opposite is I feel spacious and whole. I think I feel free is just as good. Beautiful, really nice. All right, next one. I feel time bound, limited by time.
I feel eternal.
Okay, infinite and eternal, that's beautiful. Okay, great, perfect. I feel infinite and eternal, that's beautiful. Richards is I feel timeless and whole. Same, right? Just different words. The next one is lacking and flawed. This is the hard one.
Full and perfect.
Complete.
That's it, hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what Richard says.
I said perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. I feel disconnected and confused.
Clarity.
Clarity.
Okay, so his is I feel connected and whole. Incomplete. I feel incomplete.
I am
complete. Yeah, I'm complete. I am whole. So there's a theme here, right? There's a theme of like wholeness, of completeness, of perfectness. You know, when we think about, you know, specifically when we think about our perception of reality, we think perfect looks like no grammar mistakes, great body, perfect skin. Does this sound normal? I mean, does this sound like what you guys think perfect is, right? Like, what else is perfect? House is always immaculate, right? Food is always delicious. It's never burnt. You know, all of these things, right? Well, that's not even true. Like, what is that even? That's not true. Perfect is as it is. That's perfect. I tell the same stories too all the time. When we lived in Kuwait and Israel, I used to go down to the souks to buy rugs. And of course, my children ruined every rug I ever bought over there. So it's my karma, I guess. But I used to go in and I was like, hey, you know, so I want the best rug. I want this rug to be perfect. And the guys would look at me and say, you don't want this rug. And they would pull out a rug that looked perfect and had like even sides and everything was perfect. And then they'd pull out a rug that didn't look perfect. And they'd say, you know what? This one wasn't made by hand. This one was made by hand. This is perfect. You know, it's so, so, so important to remember that our perception of perfection is our own material. So like whenever somebody comes to work with me in yoga therapy, specifically on perfectionism, this is a hard one. This is like one of the hardest ones. I think perfectionism and feeling incomplete or unworthy are the two most common themes I get, and perfectionism is really hard to work with because we forget that we're divine beings in a human experience. So I always bring people back to, well, is divinity perfect? And they're like, oh yes, divinity is perfect. Perfect, exactly the way it is. And I'm like, okay, then you're perfect just as you are. You don't need to do another thing. God doesn't make mistakes, right? The universe doesn't make mistakes. You know, even these black holes that they're finding, which I think are just fascinating, and Chris always keeps telling me not to ruin science, but you know, they're all just portals to other dimensions. It's all just a way to, and they see them, they're always at the center of a universe. They're always at the center of a galaxy. They're always a focal point, and everything sort of revolves around them. And as the turning, as it goes, as the cycles, well, what is that black hole? It's sattva. It's outside of that rajasic and the tamasic. It's just sattva. And you know, it's like our perception of like the crushing pressure of that deep gravity. Well, you know, if we looked at Kashmir Shaivism, I got the book. Kashmir Shaivism is a philosophy from Kashmir, go figure. And in Kashmir Shaivism, we talk about like Paramashiva, and that Paramashiva is like, it is ultimate. And it is, there is no weight to it. There is no gravity to it. There is no material to it. And that we all have to return to that to be reborn in a new galaxy, in a new experience, you know? And again, I go back to Stephen Hawking. So Stephen Hawking used to say, you need 3 things to make a universe: time, matter, and space. And I looked around my studio at the time, this is a couple of years ago, right after he died, I looked around and I was like, I'm creator and created. You know, why do we feel separate? It doesn't make sense to me. We're not separate. We are creator and created. We are both. So it is the unique privilege of humanity to recognize this truth as self-realization. And it is a unique privilege. So this is where we go into, so Richard goes in real deep is basically where we're starting from, right? Richard doesn't mess around. When we go deeper in, we start to re-enfranchise these parts of ourselves that we have excluded or exiled through this practice of Pratipakshabhavana. We meet these messengers, we welcome them, we offer them the fruit of their opposite, okay? So what, insecurity is here. Insecurity is here. Welcome, insecurity. Come on in, sit down. Would you like a cup of tea? What do you want to say? Thank you, insecurity. Can you meet your friend security? Now, can you hold insecurity and security in your hand? They're the same, they're opposite sides of the same coin. So that is Pratipakshabhavana. And that bringing that back together is like re-enfranchising, right? Think about when you get, oh, this is a good one. This just came to me. So think about when you have split ends on your hair, right? So you've got split ends on your hair. Well, they started out whole, right? They started out whole. And then through, you know, time and weather and the elements and conditioner and blah, 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 all the things, they start to fray. And really all you need to do is you need to say, oh, I see that damage. Let me remove the damage so that you can see yourself in your truth. You are whole. You are complete. You are exactly as you are. We are always remembering. This is another thing. I mean, it's like literally when you meet teachers that are going to be your teacher, you know, and I don't talk about it lightly. You'll know they're your teacher because everything they say, you will already know in your being. You will already have known this on some level, right? It's not like they're saying anything new to you. That's what I loved about Nashala and Richard is like I walked in, I sat down, and the more they talked, the more I was like, yeah, I got that. This is exactly the way I felt all my life. This is the sauce. Now, have I practiced it all my life? No, because I needed somebody to shine a light in the recesses of my unconscious mind to remind me of that time I was driving down the street and I thought, wow, God is just looking at everything I'm doing. He's just sitting with me all the time. He's watching through the windows of the soul. You know, but that was a fleeting moment and I forgot and went about my day and had kids melt down and had to cook dinner and all the things. And then 10 years later, 12 years later, I show up in San Diego at a meditation retreat and I'm like, that's it. That's it. And so that's how we know that, you know, when teachers speak to our heart, it awakens these opportunities to remember. So we are divine beings in a human experience, embodiments of God that are having the experience of karma. And I've been talking a lot about karma lately. In almost all of my lectures, we bring up karma because it was just like in the last, I don't know, year since I've been, doing this on a mass scale like this, that I really started realizing, oh my gosh, all of the things we're attracted to and all of the things we avert from are our karma. It's actually not that complicated. The old sages, the old yogis, again, they really had, there was a lot of trying to make things look inaccessible. Like, oh, don't even try to think about karma because you're never going to figure it out. Or, enlightenment is way far away. You might never ever reach it. Well, that's not even true. And the more I thought about karma and the more I thought about why am I attracted to things? Why am I averting things? Why it's the same coin, just opposite sides. The more I was like, oh yeah, this is my karma. This is it. If I'm attracted to something, okay. If I'm averted to it, okay, that's a sign. It's like a little red flag. No, Michelle, something's going on. The ego is the function of the self, and the self is pure awareness. So not attached to time, not limited by space, whole and complete, perfect in every way. Our karmas keep us in a cycle of remembering and forgetting. Does that make sense? So let's take a break from the lecture and let's just check in with you guys. How is that resonating with you? What do you think about this idea that we are perfect and whole just the way that we are divine beings in a human experience, and that our karma is really what's keeping us from remembering all the time?
Michelle, this is Faith. I'm currently listening to the I Am Discord of Saint Germain, and that's the whole point of it. It's that when you say I am, that's who God introduces himself or tells Moses in the Bible, right? Tell him I am sent you. So it's like God in action. We talked about the verb. So it's like we are that. We are made from that, and we have that power within it. So it comes through us.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it just makes total sense. I don't know why we can't own it and why we can see it for other people, but it's hard to own it for ourselves. So, but it makes sense. But again, it's still hard to own and believe for myself.
Sure. I think that, and I'm totally not, I don't want to shift the conversation away from where we're going, but I do want to note that it's my perception, okay, that the older teachers, like the old teacher, and not like Vivekananda, Yogananda, these teachers said it. They said, you are an embodiment of God. And everybody was like, yay, we love you. And then they died and they're like, we worship you, right? Yogananda would be rolling in his grave right now if he knew that there were churches in the United States for him. That was not his intention. His intention, and he wrote 2 books that were supposed to be like I don't know what you would call them, but basically in the books he says, stop waiting for the second coming, guys. You are the second coming. It's you, every one of you. That's what Yogananda said. And it's just beautiful. It really is beautiful. And so Yogananda and Vivekananda in my heart are also 2 of my teachers. They are transparent. They are only compassion and love. Vivekananda was the one who brought non-duality to the United States. Is amazing. But then we did have some teachers, that Swami Satchidananda is actually one of them. The reason I do not have people read Swami Satchidananda's Yoga Sutras in the 200-hour yoga teacher training is because in his enlightenment story, he talks about himself becoming enlightened and how difficult it is and that most people don't get there. And that's why I want people to read the sutras unobstructed without commentary and let them land on their heart before they go in and read somebody else's belief system. Okay, so that's why I do it. There's a reason to my madness. And, I think it's important to remember that these are all, everything is really here already. And that when we continue to look out and out and out, and like Faith said, you know, we can see it in others, not everybody, right? You know, this is a universal truth. We see it in like the people we love. We see it in the teachers we love. We put those teachers on a pedestal way up here, right? And then we expect them to do or say things differently or to not react or to not be human. But that's part of the karmic experience, are those human qualities and those human traits. And so we, you know, it's like, I remember thinking, you know, about having somebody on a pedestal. You know, I've had many people on a pedestal in my life. And every time I put somebody on a pedestal, what happens? Every time, without fail. Because when I put them on that pedestal, I think, well, they would never hurt me. They would never do anything wrong. They would never hurt somebody else inadvertently. They would never marginalize someone else. They would never do these things. Well, in saying that, I'm acknowledging that I do, right? But that they couldn't. And when they do, it brings them down to my level. And I'm like, what the heck, man? I put you way up here. Like, why'd you come down here? Because I don't see it. I have forgotten. I have forgotten who I am. I have forgotten who I am, really. And so when we can remember that even the people who do, you know, the most horrendous things are still divine beings in a human experience, that if we can remember that we all marginalize people inadvertently, that we all hurt people inadvertently, sometimes on purpose too, right? We have to remember that this is part of the human experience, it's part of our karma. It doesn't make us less divine. It doesn't make us less perfect. It doesn't make us less whole, right? When we judge those aspects of ourselves as bad or wrong, that is when the misperception starts. And that's when we begin to move away from the wholeness and separate and cut off parts of ourselves. You know, when I worked in eating recovery, it was so clear. It's actually where I learned a lot of this stuff, like just from experience, because I saw it in front of my eyes. I saw people that were beautiful, whole, perfect individuals. And if I told them that, they would say, you're out of your mind. And there would be other words that were colorful. And, you know, they would not believe me because they had cut off so much of themselves. And said, I don't want it. It's not right. It's not perfect. That other person's perfect. You know, comparison is the thief of joy, right? And so we really do like tend to do that as a human being. And this practice of iRest helps us to come out of that. All right, let's go to some questions. I've got, okay, hold on. Tara, are you ready?
Yeah, sorry, I'm here. I was thinking about the question of forgetting and why we forget and remember and remember and forget. And I was going back to the importance of forgetting in some of the, like the Vedantic texts and the Upanishads and stuff, and how much emphasis is placed there on reincarnation and rebirth. And I think forgetting is always used as a microcosm for death and rebirth. Like that process of forgetting is part of the way that we become less afraid, because it's a similar embracing oblivion and coming out of oblivion again. And it just, on a day-to-day level, cognitively, is repeating the great cycle.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Beautiful. Faith. Faith, did you have something or no? No? Okay. Alyssa, did you have something?
On earlier when we came up, earlier when you mentioned patterns or things that keep coming up, I believe, is it the samskaras? I believe that's where, when I started working with your program, I started to be able to blow through those samskaras very quickly, because now I knew where to place that awareness. And earlier this year, you know, God and I had some problems with God. I was like, you know what, you're kind of getting into my head a little too much. You're bothering me. And ultimately, I ended up publishing a manual earlier this year of God's voice in my head. And it's essentially called The Organizing Principles of the Multiverse of Oneness, where he completely breaks down the narrative of why we forget and how we can connect back home. And Yoga Nidra is the physical experience of remembering our way back home. So this is quite a ride. This is all very interesting. And at some point, maybe if you can touch whenever, if not today, writing, whatever, I'm thinking the other generation, I agree with you, the greatest generation, the elderly now, we're finding that there's so much latent abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual, and how to like really help them. My work is about helping them transition now with leaving that behind here so they can ascend instead of having to come back and do all that work again because they're holding on so tight to, the ideas that it never happened and buried so deeply. So I think that generation holds us energetically in negative patterns that we're seeing purging now in every place we look. So,
Yeah.
very important.
Wow, that was powerful right there. So I think, I think that there's a lot of wisdom to what you just said. I do think that there is when we talk about what Elisa just talked about, we're talking about working with the causal plane. So the causal plane is where all of these thoughts, feelings, memories, experiences are like both originate and where they go when the body is no longer there, even when the body is here. Like if I have a thought, it goes to the causal plane. You better be careful what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just tell you, because it goes up there and it's like, I liken it to, it's almost like the upper atmosphere of like our earth, right? Our earth. Think about it like that. And it's like above the clouds. And then the astral plane is like the clouds. So that's the condensation of the causal plane. What is coming into manifestation? And then what is coming into manifestation rains down from the astral plane into the earth plane, into the earth loka. And so we can look at that from like, a societal, we can look at it from a personal experience. There's so many ways we can look at it. Ayurveda says that. Ayurveda says all disease starts in the mind. And if we're looking at causal, astral, earth plane, I can look at those planes in my one experience of being, or I can look at it in a universal experience of being in our planet, or I can look at it in like a galactic sort of sense, right? I can look at it, the entire Milky Way galaxy, like what's happening in our galaxy. And I believe that you're right. I think that there has been a lot of repressed guilt, shame, fear, anger, just a lot of repressed, some might say shadow emotions. I always veer away from this idea of shadow versus light because it's all light. It's all light. But I think that those things are coming up because, as you say, people are transitioning. My grandmother died at 91. That was like 5-6 years ago. Her friends are now dying, her younger friends. And they are releasing their energies back into this causal plane, and that is coming back to us. And I think it's coming back to us in a more positive way because we are, not all of us, but a lot of us are waking up or are awake to the fact that my perception and my verbalization is not universal truth. And see, that was the problem with those previous generations. Is the previous generation was like my way or the highway. And I'm not saying just my grandmother. Go back to the Egyptians. My way or the highway. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of the abuse and slavery of the Israelites and, and all sorts of different races. The Egyptians had a lot of that going on, a lot of like sexual trauma, a lot of, and I'm, you could go even further back. And I only say this because when I am dealing with things that are going on in society and I really want to take a non-dual stance, I go as far back in human history as I possibly can to look at what has happened, what we are actually capable of. And that brings me back to reality. Because in my idealist mind, right, we should all be loving and kind and compassionate to one another. But in my idealist mind, I have forgotten, again, we're talking about remembering and forgetting, right? I have forgotten what humans are capable of. And it is some gnarly stuff, right? So the more that we, sort of purge these ancestral karmas, they will come back around. But the idea is when they come back around, they are more uplifting. The work is being done, whereas before it wasn't being done because it was like shushed or shadowed or like hidden in some way. You know, my daughter's psychotherapist says that secrets are, I don't remember, I'm not going to quote her right, but she's like, family secrets are, in her mind, the root of suffering. And she said it in a different way that was really, really beautiful. And, you know, and I sort of agree with her. You know, it's like, if we harbor those secrets and we hold them, then we hold the shame, we hold the guilt, and it's all misunderstood. That's what's really fascinating. I was talking to Alexis a couple of weeks ago, and she told me about something that was traumatic that happened to her in childhood. I had no idea about it. And I said, well, you know, I said, we can talk about that. And no, she didn't want to talk about it. She would only answer 2 questions about it. That was it. And it, you know, I talked to my husband about it, and I said, her perception is that what happened is bad and wrong. My perception as an adult is what happened as part of child development. Like, what she's talking about is something that occurs in many children of her age, right? And because of the situation and because of what happened, it is, I'm not going to say it's right, I'm not going to say it's wrong, but a lot of children go through these developmental stages and have, you know, the experiences like this. And Alexis she has judged it as wrong and bad, and has judged herself as wrong and bad for having been a part of that experience. Does that make sense? So that perception is holding her in these feelings of, you know, separation, of like worthlessness, of, you know, like brokenness. And for a 12-year-old, I'm like, you know, there's some work to be done there. But at the same time, sort of like what we were talking about yesterday, it's not my job to force her into that place. Like, I'm going to hold space for her. I'm going to love her. I'm going to tell her she's perfect just as she is. And if she wants to talk to me or Dr. Black about it, you know, we're here for that. And hopefully she can process through and reframe her perception of reality. You know, and I'm sure there are many layers to it, right? There are many layers to these types of things. But I always tell the story because, again, you know, it's part of that, you know, when we think our perception is true, then we are in a place where we can't let go. Does that make sense? We are in a place where we are going to hold it. We are going to hold on to that. That was wrong or bad. They did something that was wrong or bad to me. I did something that was wrong or bad. I'm less than because of this experience. You're less than because of this experience. And that's my perception, and that is the truth. But that's not real. That's just a perception, right? And so I really feel like a lot of people who hold on to these stories and these manifestations are holding on to this misperception that it was a certain way, it is a certain way, it's always going to be that way. And so these tools, especially iRest, does a lot of work on these unconscious stories without getting into the story. And that's what I keep saying over and over and over again, is that we do the work of Yoga Nidra so that we can work with some of this unconscious material without getting so deep into the story. Even the people who like mentioned that they had like an unsettling experience with one of the Yoga Nidras, they were like, oh, okay, I've got work to do. Let me call my therapist. But it wasn't like they had to share the story with us. That wasn't it. It was like, oh, there's something there I need to deal with. You see what I'm saying? It really lends itself to holistic healing. Brooke.
Yeah, I have a question. So I have a grandmother who is no longer in her physical body, and she experienced a lot of trauma in her life and was very, very afraid to die. And she died also relatively young for an older person. Like, she died at 70. And so I was wondering if it's possible to use Yoga Nidra to like speak to her soul. I'm not sure if she's reincarnated or if she's like passed on, but to kind of like help her. My mom kind of thinks that maybe she's stuck in in-between worlds right now because she had so much stuff going on in her life and so many samskaras that she never really worked through. So we both kind of believe that maybe she's dancing in some in-between worlds and she's kind of stuck and hasn't really fully moved on. So would that be a possibility to help her in a way?
So can I ask you a couple of questions? I don't want to get too far off track, but like, so have you guys had any experience with her? Like any experience with like seeing, hearing, you know, little things, little synchronicities, like since she passed?
I've had dreams where I've been in contact with her.
Okay, all right. And so in the dreams where you're in contact with her, what is she telling you?
She She seems to be happy in the dreams.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so can you tell me a little bit about how she presents herself?
She's often presented in her in the last stage of her life when she was like older and like about to die. So she's often presented like that.
Okay. Okay. So I would say that, probably what I would recommend, and I'm not an expert in this field, I just do this stuff a lot because I'm like a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, I guess. But I would sit outside when it's really quiet and start talking to her and have her use the wind to talk to you. And she will. And it's like, I can't even describe it to you. Like, it's so interesting because you can be there and it can be like super, super windy. Like you can there be very windy, or it can be completely still, and you can ask questions, and literally the atmosphere will shift based on the question that you ask. Or like, and you can say, if you're here, let me know, and they'll let you know. It's really fascinating. So I would talk to her and maybe ask her, do you feel at peace? Do you feel, whole and complete? Do you need anything from us? Are you transitioned? Are you healing? The idea in the metaphysics world, so I don't get too much into this in like yoga teacher training or stuff like this, but because I went out to California, I did a lot of, I was around a lot of people who were very in the metaphysics sort of world. And the idea from a metaphysical standpoint, although I do think there's a lot of dogma in this, so don't take it to the bank or anything. But the idea is that when we leave this body, we go through the astral plane, and then we go through the causal plane. And as we're moving through the planes, we're healing so that we can come back into another body. So that's the metaphysical sort of theory or philosophy. Now, for me personally, I love non-duality because non-duality says, you're here 1 second, you're in another body the next. Like non-duality, there's no separation in time. Time's a construct of the mind. So even the idea that she might be like in an in-between, or the idea of like ghost, or the idea of any of those things, that goes more back to like psychic energy, residue of psychic energy. And so from my perspective as a non-dual teacher, which is, the sort of the path that I've gone on, is that, I'm in this, being is here, Michelle dies, being is in another body. Like it's instant. It's not like, but that said, there can be psychic residue, and the psychic residue is like, those samskaras, those karmas, those latent impressions that haven't gone away. And then I take it a step further when I start talking about like death and reincarnation and rebirth, and say that those samskaras that are still here, those psychic energies, stay with your family. They stay in your family, and they are reborn into new generations. And so familial karma and ancestral karma is real. And it's like, so what you want to do is you want to come to a place with your grandma where you feel that she's safe, content, at peace, that her psychic energy is at rest and is like back in the cycle of the universe. Like think the elements, think the gunas, like let that psychic energy move on. Then don't carry it with you, because how old are you, Brooke?
I'm 20.
You're 20. And one day you may have kids, maybe?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So I don't want to assume, never want to assume that. But if you have kids, everything that has happened to you since you were in your mother's uterus, or not in her uterus, in her ovaries, actually, everything that's happened to you since your mother was born, because eggs are immediate. They're in baby girls, like right away. All the eggs they'll ever have are right there. So for 2 whole generations, you have been like in an experience of being. And every psychic energy that is being let off, if you will, in your experience, in your field, is going to affect you on a cellular level. So what we want to do, and what you can do, is you can look at and yes, medical professionals are now seeing this is actually real. It's called epigenetics. And they have like done some really cool studies about where they can see DNA mutations based on certain events in people's lives. It's fascinating work. But that's the work to do, is, you know, make peace with her, make sure she's okay, and then make peace with her traumas. You know, understand that, you know, when we leave the body, nothing sticks to Purusha. It only sticks to Prakriti. Well, what's the Prakriti that's next to her when she died? Is you guys. So don't take that in, you know, process it in the way that's best for you and let it go.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing.
Yeah. Sage it out. When in doubt, sage it out. That's a good one. That's a t-shirt, guys. All right, Dr. Gardner Scott.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is it possible that you could just go a little deeper into duality as you use it? I've read it, and I, you know, have taken information from the manual, but I'm still having a little trouble with the concept of everything.
Sure. So our experience is dualized because I perceive myself to be separate from right? So my experience currently is dualized because I perceive myself to be separate. But the more work I do, the more I realize that I am a divine being in a human experience, and that the divinity in me is the same divinity in faith, is the same divinity in you, right? And so that even that idea of a soul is really psychic. It's not actually part of like the fabric of God. It's part of our psychic experience. It's that karmic residue. And that's what Patanjali is talking about. Patanjali is talking about, like, we have psychic residue that is samskara, that's our karma, right? And like I'm talking to Brooke, so her grandmother left some psychic residue, right? And that is her traumas that her mother knows and her granddaughter knows. And so they have now internalized that, and that is living on in them. Does that make sense? And that is the duality of our experience. Now, if you practice non-duality, and non-duality is like a practice, it's not a religion, it's a philosophical practice. So when you practice non-duality, you practice looking at the entire world through the lens of non-duality, which means that I am not separate from you, you are not separate from me. In fact, even this desk that I'm sitting at, this computer that I'm working on, the room, the door, the studio, my environment, my house, my kids, everybody is one with me in Purusha. That there is no separation, that all of the separation is just the Maya. In yoga, we call it Maya. It's the construct of the mind. And the mind is always trying to make sense of the different things, and it's trying to like create categories or places for those different things to go. We like to compartmentalize things. That's how human beings survive, right? I compartmentalize things as either dangerous or safe, and that keeps me alive. And we continue to do this over and over and over and over throughout our entire life. Well, at some point, some of us realize, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Because none of that's really true. You know, I mean, like, yes, fire is dangerous, but it's not bad or wrong, you know? And the only reason it's dangerous is because I want to survive. If I don't want to survive, it's not dangerous. For example, if I die and I leave the body and they burn my body because I want to be cremated, is fire dangerous or bad at that point? No, because I'm not in the body. You know, the perception of danger, the perception of bad is only because of the perception of survival. And so non-duality says that all of that is basically the Maya that is keeping us in the bondage of separation. And that when we feel whole and complete, and when the separation is gone, we are in our true nature of enlightened being, and being is not separate. So when I was studying with Richard the first time, he asked this question, is being in you or are you in being? And I sat with it for a long time, and what I came up with was being is the sea that we are in. So imagine that you're like, imagine that you are a bowling pin. I don't know why I like this analogy, but I really do. Imagine you're a bowling pin with no bottom, and there's an infinite sea of Purusha, and the bowling pin gets dropped in to the infinite sea of Purusha, right? So now the bowling pin's bobbing up and down, and that's you, right? The container is the bowling pin. The Purusha is the soul or the being that is actually living and breathing you, right? Now I look out on the water and there's 1,000 million trillion other bowling pins everywhere. And they're bobbing in the same Purusha that I'm bobbing in. Well, we look separate, but if the bowling pins disintegrate, we're all one. Does that make sense? So that's non-duality. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, and non-duality is not for everybody. Trust me, I totally understand that. I honestly think that part of my affinity for it is a coping mechanism because I have lost so many people in my life. It helps me to make sense of it. It helps me to make sense of the psychic energy, the residue, the et cetera, et cetera. I've never, well, that's a whole other talk. That's why I have an affinity to it. Any other questions, thoughts before we take lunch? Okay, so before we take lunch, I'm going to do a few more slides so that we can come back in and just do practices. So again, our karmas keep us in a cycle of remembering and forgetting. So Richard starts by the same way that we start in Tantric Yoga Nidra. Iris also sets an intention or a sankalpa in the form of a heartfelt desire. In addition to setting an intention, Iris also helps practitioners to connect to their inner resource. This is just one difference between Iris and other forms of Yoga Nidra. So because Iris is working with people who have experienced PTSD, he wants you to create an inner resource that you can use as a felt sensation in your body. And that is a big difference between Iris and other Yoga Nidras. So rotation of consciousness, Iris uses specific techniques of Tantric Pratyahara to rotate the consciousness. Richard brings awareness to each sense organ as it's associated with each chakra so that it brings balance to the subtle bodies. He will also use Kapalabhati, mudra, chanting, and visualization to move the awareness through the container. So like yesterday I said, okay, if I want to feel safe, where do I bring my awareness to? If I want to feel safe, where do I bring my awareness to? What's the sense organ or the organ of action that is associated with the root chakra?
Throat, right? Or the mouth?
The mouth. So think about a baby who sucks his thumb. What's it trying to do? It's trying to feel secure. Because what was it feeling secure with earlier? Mama's breast, right? Or milk. Right? There's a direct tie to what goes in my mouth and me feeling safe and secure, right? It's actually one of the reasons that we misunderstand, we misunderstand this and we smoke, or we misunderstand this and we drink, or we misunderstand this and, we vape or whatever. There's all different things that we do to feel secure that has to do with the mouth, right? So the ears are associated with the throat chakra. The eyes are associated with the solar plexus. The sacral is the lips and tongue, I believe. I want to say lips and tongue. So these are the organs of action that correspond to the different chakras in our body. And sometimes Richard will use that to get you to neutralize that sensation. So if you bring your awareness to your mouth, feel the sensations in your mouth, feel the sensations inside of your cheek, and you're there, it helps to balance your chakra bodies without talking about it. Isn't that cool? It's cool. It's really cool. All right, so this is the last slide we're going to go over before we go to lunch today. So we are right on time here. So this is the complete IRES cycle. IRES can be broken into where you work one-on-one with a particular skill at a time, or it can be practiced all together. The complete cycle is below. And what we're going to do when we get back is we're going to take time to do a couple of these independently, and then we're going to do a practice that includes all of them. Okay, so you guys, I recommend you get this book, you read it, you look at it, because some of these practices independently are really great at, helping you to find that sense of balance and ease and be more in remembering. So first step is heartfelt mission. Second step is intention. Third step is inner resource. Fourth step is body sensing. Fifth step is breath sensing. Sixth step is opposites of emotion. Seventh is opposites of thinking. 8 is joy. 9 is awareness. 10 is wholeness. And so I can literally come in and I can just do this one, or I can come in and just do body sensing, or I can come in and just do opposites of emotion, or I can come in and just do opposites of thinking. These two right here, again, are my favorite off the mat, because then I go into a store and I think something and I think the opposite and neutralizes it. That's great, you know, and it's really helpful. Joy, awareness, wholeness, these are the later stages, but again, can be done separately. So when we get back, we'll go through a couple of those different practices, and we will we'll get some feedback. You guys can play with them a little bit, and then we'll do a complete practice, and we'll close out with some feedback, okay? Awesome, guys. All right, well, I'm gonna do what I did yesterday. I think I'm just going to stop the recording.